So this sort of evolved out of a series of conversations then with the director and head curator at the Mac Museum of Art, Dr. Carol Potadwarny. And, it sort of evolved from there as like hey, can we do like a really interesting study of a bunch of these paintings? And we gathered a diverse group of scientists and technical art historians and researchers, and sort of came up with this really fun project. And so it took place over 3 or 4, 5 years, I think, eventually. And yeah, we x-rayed paintings. I used x-ray fluorescence, which is a technique that it's like an elemental analysis technique that looks at the composition of whatever you're analyzing. So in this case, it was looking at paints. So what was the chemistry of the paints? Because that often tells you something about the raw materials that the artist chose, the dating, something about the chronology, because certain commercial pigments weren't available until certain periods of time historically. So there was sort of a whole series of questions that were specific to each painting, each of these 9 paintings that we studied for the project. But we were lucky to get to use facilities across McMaster to be able to analyze these paintings non-destructively. It was sort of part of my first encounter working with like historical, like European oil paintings. Like as an archaeologist, I study mostly things that are a lot older than that. So this was there's like such a high diversity of mineral pigments that were used and commercially produced between like the 17th and 20th century. So to me, it was like a really cool learning experience. I think we found, for instance, like the Van Gogh painting had like an earlier composition underneath it that was abandoned. It was like half finished, like how you see the painting under the painting is kind of a very commonly known sort of thing when it comes to some artists, particularly Van Gogh, who was recycling canvases a lot in his lifetime. The lab is basically like a bigger, more high throughput version of what I was doing for my PhD. So the lab gets funding from the National Science Foundation, and we use that funding to employ students and train undergraduates and graduate students who help with our day-to-day operations. So we analyze up to 10,000 samples a year of ancient pottery and stone tools, so obsidian and chert, using NAA and XRF and ICP-MS techniques. And so on it, there's 4 of us as senior faculty and a couple of staff members, and then we have postdocs and graduate students. So it's a larger lab group than I was used to, which is great because there's a lot of really great interaction going on. And so yeah, any given day I'm working on a technical reporting for a obsidian project in Patagonia or a pottery project in Alaska. And so I get to sort of learn so many incredible things about all these different research projects all over the world. I don't get to travel for all of them. It's my own personal research that I get to travel on, but a big part of my job is sort of working with our senior team and sort of managing the lab, operating the lab, day-to-day operations, making sure everything's running smoothly, getting our grants, getting our publications. So we produce data for collaborators and we help them interpret it, and then we generally co-author papers as well. So it's a lot of different hats again.
Yeah.